Hello, my name is Willie Williams, and from time to time, we share stories that deal with ministry, and we talk about the ups and downs that pertain to ministry. But today I want to do something a little different. Today you're going to hear a story from a lady. Her name is Melinda Wheeler, and she's going to share her story about relationships. There are so many in the body of Christ, in the Church of Christ, who go through relationship problems. They go through pain and sorrow and divorce, but we don't talk about it. Today we're going to talk about it. I pray that you sit back, that you listen, and that you be encouraged. Many times, people, Christians get into relationships. And when they get into relationships, much like people in the world get into relationships. So we want to experience what we hear on the radio. We want to experience what we see in the movies. We want that love story. We want to walk on the beach. We want to do, or we want to emulate the picture that the world shows us. If you can kind of tell us kind of your story of your journey in relationships, and even from a Christian perspective, just things that you experienced when you first started dating, when you first started looking for someone to be with early on. What was your experience? What are those things that you saw and that you were looking for growing up when you first decided, I want to be with someone?
My first experience with men wasn't good. Came from an abusive home. However, I'd been told all my life, you have to marry in the church. You've got to marry in the church. Well, my dad was preaching at this little church, and the only single guy there was a widower of 80 years old, and I was like, I am not marrying Brother Hornbuckle. He has bad breath, and he's old. Not happening. Well, Daddy said, if I told you you're going to marry Brother Hornbuckle, you're going to marry Brother Hornbuckle. And that was his name, Hornbuckle. So as I grew older, I thought, I do need to marry in the church. I knew I needed to. And I was 19, had my first boyfriend, was in college, and I met Troy. And I thought, wow, he's perfect. Good looking, going to college, he's smart, and he's a Christian. I dated him for about 2 months. He comes to me, breaks up, says, I'm gay. Well, that didn't work. So a friend of mine said, I'll introduce you to someone. And I thought, okay. All I was thinking of at that time was I wanted to be loved, I wanted to be cherished, I wanted somebody to take care of me, but above all, I wanted to escape. I didn't like where I was at. I wanted someone to take me out of there, and I thought I needed a guy to do that. Now, how many times do we think we need someone to take us out of where we're at instead of looking to God? And that's what I was doing. So I met Jay. He said all the right things, told me how beautiful I was, how wonderful I was, and before you knew it, I was in a relationship, found myself pregnant, so we got married. I dropped out of church for a little while, and then I went back. And at that time they told me, they said, well, you can't really do much unless Jay is a Christian. He needs to become a Christian. So Jay got baptized, but our marriage just, it wasn't a godly marriage. I was looking for all the right things in the wrong person. And I just think how many times I did that, looking for someone to love me, someone to cherish me, and not knowing that whole time that God was there and that he would do that.
When you were in the church, and they say, okay, you need to marry in the church. You need to marry in the church. Did you understand why they said, hey, you need to marry in the church? At that age, did you really say, I understand, I get why they say that? Or is it something that you heard and you wanted to be obedient, but you really didn't understand the importance of it?
I would have to say I did not understand the importance of it. And I'd heard that, you're not to be unequally yoked, don't marry someone of not like faith, but nobody could tell me why. Nobody could say, hey, if you marry this person who's not a Christian, you're going to be pulled away. You're going to have these problems. Nobody explained that to me. And that was, I think, the hardest part. Was it 1 Peter, where Peter's telling the women of the church, that because of them, their husbands may be pulled to Christ. I kept thinking, well, I'm a strong person, and my faith is strong, so therefore I can pull other people in. And nobody told me, you can't change somebody. Nobody told me that they have to want to change. You can't force somebody to change. So that was where the issues came in, I think.
Do you feel like when when he said, you know, I'm gay, and you realized I'm in this relationship with someone who is obviously living a different lifestyle, as a Christian, what was your response?
My first response was shock. And of course, back in 1987, 1988, homosexuality wasn't something that was talked about a lot. I just knew it was a sin. And I was, honestly, I was devastated. You know, personally, here's a man, I held his hand, I let him kiss me, and just knew that we were going to have a Christian life together, even though, you know, I mean, I'm 18, 19 years old, I was very idealistic. So when Troy told me that, I was shocked. Looking back, I think maybe he was just trying to break up with me in a nice way, but that was my initial response.
You want to get married, you want to get serious, and you want to start a family. What is that experience like for you?
It was very scary. I was married to a man who had no concept of what it was like to be a dad. I did not realize that.
You know, what was your priority?
Right.
Versus your priority today is completely
Right.
different than the priority then.
So here I am, 20 years old, a new baby, married to the man who fathered my child. And all I could think about that time was, how am I going to be taken care of? Am I going to be alone? I can't be alone. I have to marry him. So we did. And I wasn't looking for anyone. At that point in time, my mind was not on God. My mind was on the physical well-being. Who's going to pay the bills? Who's going to help me with this child? What are we going to do? Where are we going to live? Honestly, God was not even in my peripheral vision at that time. It was straight ahead on what was going to happen next. And that was all I could think about. And as our life began, we had my first son. 22 months later, I had my second son. During that 22 months, we went through a lot. Our oldest son was sick, had a lot of health problems, a lot of surgeries, and more to come. And during that time, the father was not responsive. He was not helpful. He did not go with me to doctor's appointments. He wasn't there for the surgeries. He wasn't there for those things that we needed. But still, although I was back to church, my mind was still on what's going to happen next. It was still on Aaron and what's going to happen with Aaron. And then I'm pregnant again, and here comes Michael, and you know, just 2 weeks after Aaron had had kidney surgery, I've got another baby in my arms, and a man who's more interested in TV, who's more interested in sitting around doing nothing. We lived on welfare. We lived on food stamps and Medicaid and handouts from family, evicted from place to place. So every day was consumed with, where's my next meal going to come from? How am I going to make this happen? And still not looking to God as my provider, looking to that man to provide for me. And he was failing me daily, every day. I didn't know if I was going to wake up and find out he'd quit a job. I didn't know if I was going to have food for my babies, which pantry was going to help me, which one was the last time they were going to help me. Those things all were coming into play. And then 10.5 months after Michael was born, I had Shay. Sweet, beautiful, lively Shay. And again, still a man who was not involved in parenting. Still not involved in our world and in our life. He did not know how to be a dad. He didn't have a good example of a father, and so he didn't know how to be one, and he did not know how to be a husband. So here's Shay, and life is good. We've moved several times, 6 times. We're still struggling some. Moved to North Carolina, find out I'm pregnant with Autumn, my last child, my only girl. And my grandfather took Gerald behind the garage and said, listen, you get this woman pregnant one more time, you're going to be missing some important parts. And I thought maybe my grandpa would kind of kick Jay into shape, hey, take care of these people. At this point, I wasn't going to church at all. My faith wasn't there. I was scared. I had turned completely away from God. 180-degree turnaround. I was not looking for God in anywhere. I was just looking to survive. Then I get a call that my dad's in prison, and my mother needs me back in Colorado. So we moved back to Colorado, and I'm thinking, okay, it's going to turn around. Jay's back where he wants to be. He loves Colorado. He's going to go out and get a job. Well, he doesn't. We go through a program called Texas Coalition, or the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, and they help us get into housing. And a woman there, a beautiful woman, she pulled me aside and she said, Melinda, that man you're married to, I know you love him, but he's never going to provide for your family, ever. You need to do something. So she got me back, got me some training in computers and things, and I've been working ever since. That was 25 years ago. And because of that woman, I was making it. I started back to church. There was the church in Aurora, Colorado, who the preacher there was an old family friend. And so he started picking the kids and I up for church every day. Let me tell you, sitting in church by yourself with 4 babies, all of them fussy, somebody getting into something, and trying to do it by yourself is the hardest thing in the world. And the other members weren't quite sure how to react to me. They didn't know how to take me. They didn't know how to deal with my situation because they hadn't faced it before in that congregation. So the help wasn't there as much as it should have been. I don't blame them. Like I said, they really didn't know. They didn't have a clue. And so life was scary, but I was back in church and I was trying to get my mind right, trying to get my heart right. But I was still focused on those day-to-day. Am I bringing in enough money? Can I pay the rent? Can I pay the bills? What's going to happen if Jay decides he doesn't want this anymore? All these things are coming into my head.
So when you were there with your children and your husband wasn't there, how did the women of the church treat you when you're there and you have your children, but there's no man accompanying you to worship?
I was pretty much a pariah. They weren't sure how to take me. They weren't sure what to do with me. For the most part, I came in, spent most of my time in the crying room crying, to be honest. The kids were fine, but I was crying. And they didn't know what to do. And one time I was invited to somebody's house, one and only time. And my son Shay, beautiful, sweet, full of life Shay, dives into the pool, all of his clothes on, sitting at the bottom of the pool. I hear gasp. I look around, there's Shay sitting there, grinning at the bottom of the pool. One of the men jumped in, clothes on, and I heard somebody say, why does she have to bring them anyways? I went out the front, caught a bus, and went home. I went back to church on Sunday, but I didn't want to be there. But I went. But one of the women there, she was lovely. I loved her so much. She found out that I was taking a bus to go grocery shopping every month when my food stamps came in. When she found that out, she said, Melinda, I'll help you with that. She took me then every month to go do my grocery shopping. I could do it all at one time with her. And that was a blessing. But other than that, they had no clue.
Do you feel like the church is ill-equipped to deal with people's life situations? The church really don't know what to do with different types of individuals who have gone through relationship problems. It's almost like you have, it's almost like you're poisonous and people stay away from you.
I do believe that in a lot of ways. Simply because we are so fixated on what not to do that we sometimes forget what to do. Or we don't learn what to do. You know, okay, you can't divorce unless it's for adultery. No other reason for divorce. So someone comes into your church and maybe they've been a lifelong Christian and they're divorced for whatever reason. Maybe money, maybe just incompatibility. the church doesn't know what to do with you. They don't know, is it okay to accept them? Is it okay not to accept them? Now she's got all these children to add on to that. How do we deal with that? They're just, that they don't know.
And you were still married at the time.
And I was still married at the time, and they still didn't know. Because I've got a husband who's been baptized. He'd been baptized. But he wouldn't go to church. He had no interest in church. He'd been raised Catholic. But to him, church was Easter and Christmas. You know, or maybe going forward for, you know, or going to the priest for confessional every so often, and then you're okay. He didn't understand who God is. He still doesn't know who God is. And that breaks my heart for him. But the women and the men, they were at a loss. They really were. Nobody had told them what to do, how to do it. And so they just didn't know.
At some point, now the relationship is hitting that breaking point. If you can kind of talk about that, and even in the perspective of the church.
By the time our marriage started to fall apart, I was in Cleveland, Texas. And I had been going to the Granbury Street congregation for about 6 months when I came home from a Summer Youth Series event with my kids, and the truck wasn't there, and my husband was gone. Looking back, I can see where it started, but I didn't see it at the time it was happening. But I saw he had left me, went to Missouri, told me, just disappeared. And comes back, I let him come back.
Could you talk about that for a second? So you say one day you got up and he's gone.
He's gone. The car's gone. My best friend that I worked with at the Radio Shack call center took me all over Fort Worth. Somebody said we saw the car sitting somewhere. She took me all over Fort Worth. We found the car. It had been dropped off and had been towed and was in a towing yard. And still no sign of Jay. Then I get a phone call one night and he says, Melinda, this woman's holding me captive in her basement. I can't get out. And I was like, okay. He says, I have no money to get home. I have nothing to do. I can't do it. So I called my grandma and grandpa.
So his response to you, he's been gone for a while. His response to you after being absent is, I'm trapped in the basement in a woman's house, and I have no more money, and I need you to come help me.
Yeah. You know, how many times as Christians do we do that? It's like, okay, God. Okay, God, somebody's got me trapped here. I don't know what to do. Now you come help me.
Right,
yeah.
right.
You know, we wait till we're at the very bottom. But Grandma and Grandpa were graceful. They loaned me the money to send to Jay and get him back home. He came home and life kind of went back to normal. One day I'm in Aaron's Rent-A-Center where we have some furniture rental. One of the guys there that we had gotten to know really well says, hey, didn't I see you down on the street with some other woman? You better not have been with that other woman. And Jay says, oh no, not me at all. Then I start finding porn on the computers. I start finding emails to other women, and I just let it go over my head. I blocked it out. It's not happening. He's not going to leave me. Where would he go? What would he do?
So even with the him being locked in the basement with another in a woman's house, did you ever question him about how did he get there and why was he there?
No, I did not.
Did your grandparents ever ask you or question?
My grandparents did ask me, Melinda, what was he doing? I was like, I don't know, but he's back home. I don't care. He's home. You know, I needed somebody to help me with the kids. I didn't drive. I have a seizure disorder. What am I going to do? I can't do this without him. That was my thought.
So your focus was, I need somebody to help me. You feel like there are a lot of women who, and even in the body of Christ, who are so focused on having needs met that they're not looking at what God is saying to them or what signs are around them.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
When I was at Harding, I got to know a lot of young women there. I absolutely loved every one of them. And so many times they sit around, they're like, okay, who are you dating? What are we going to do? You know, they're not focused on God. They're looking at their future on earth rather than their future in heaven.
Right.
They're thinking, okay, I've got to have a man because that's what society says. You cannot be strong, you cannot be independent, and you cannot be on your own without a man. Well, I can't be strong, I can't be independent, and I can't be on my own without God.
Right.
And
you can have God, and you can have a man and be weak, be destitute, and be lost,
yes,
and have a man.
yes.
You know,
And but we don't know that. We don't realize that, especially when we're young. We're so caught up in what looks good and what looks pretty, that ring on our finger, that wedding dress. And we forget that to give, to be able to keep giving, you have to be filled up.
Yeah.
And that man's not going to fill you up. He is not. And we forget that. And I honestly did not know that. I was not taught that in the church. I was not taught that by my family. It wasn't that my grandmother thought she had to have a man to be strong and independent. After my grandpa died, she lived for years without one. But
You didn't know it was possible.
I didn't know it was possible. She didn't tell me, Melinda, you know what? You are strong. You've got God. You don't need anybody. And until you realize that, don't marry. Nobody told me that. And so once I learned that, you know, things got easier. But for that time being, I was weak. You know, I've always thought of myself as a strong woman and in control. I look back now, there was no control in my life. It was all chaos.
Yeah.
I didn't have God. I had a man. Just a simple human man who didn't know God.
So what was that divorce, and when the relationship started to go, and the conversation of divorce came up?
Actually, the conversation of divorce never came up. I come home, like I said, one night from Summer Youth Series. I've got the 4 kids in the car. We're with one of the elders and his wives. And I was like, where's the van? Why isn't your daddy here? And Michael says, well, Mama, didn't he tell you? I said, tell me what? So he told us today that he's leaving. He's moving to California.
So you're in the car with the elder of the church and his wife. You pull up to the house and the car is gone. But your children know.
My children know.
And you don't know, and you find out that your husband is left in front of the elder and his wife.
Yes. That was one of the most heartbreaking, humiliating responses. And Sid told me, he said, Melinda, go in, see what's going on, check it out. Well, I found the letter. He'd met a woman on the internet, moved to California with her. He's still with her to this day. At that moment in time, all I could think was, my life is over. I just want to lay down and cry. Sid and Sherry hugged me, told me they loved me. If I needed anything, let them know. Then they went home. I went into the house without my husband, with 4 kids, ages 9 to 13. And I didn't know what I was going to do or how I was going to do it. Thankfully, I was working. I had a job. I didn't have to worry about finances. I did pretty good. And we were living in a house where the landlord was very gracious. And so every day I struggled and I struggled to get up. I had a friend that told me, she said, Melinda, you've got to quit surviving. You have to do more than survive. You have to live. You need to get counseling. Go get some counseling. Because I would call her, I'm like, I need a sleeping pill. Bring me a bottle. And she's like, hell no. Not doing that.
Had you started taking sleeping pills?
I had not. In fact, I never did.
But you wanted.
But I wanted to.
You wanted to numb the pain.
I wanted to numb the pain. I wanted it to be done. And she said, you've got 4 children. Well, I had to take my 2 younger boys to the Cherokee Home for Children. They were getting into trouble, and I had to work. I had no way to control them. The people at church helped me when they could, but everybody had jobs. Everybody else had lives. And so there was no one there for me when I needed somebody to go pick Shay up because he got in trouble again. There was nobody there to go get Michael when he was so angry he was breaking broom handles over his brother's head. Nobody was there to go fix that window when Michael threw the phone through the window because he was so angry. And
so you're dealing with your own emotions. Your children are dealing with their emotions. And you're in the Lord's church, and they don't know what to do with you.
They don't know what to do. They were good to me. I will never, ever fault them for not doing their best. Some of them came over. There were some that would come when Shay was suspended from school. One of the elders and his wife are former school teachers. So they got Shay and put him to work. One of the other elders there had he wasn't an elder, but he was a good man, an older member, and he had a ranch, and he would take the boys out on the weekends sometimes and help.
Yeah.
But for the long term and the daily, day-to-day stuff, there was nobody there. And then when Julia told me, she said, you need to get some help. You've got to go do something. And they referred me to Russell, who was a counselor over at the Westfield Church of Christ. And that's when my healing started, going through to him. But up to that point, I could have just laid down somewhere and died and not cared if it hadn't been for my babies.
What do you think the perception is with counseling and Christianity? Counseling in the church?
There's a stigma to it. If you have God, you shouldn't need anything else. You shouldn't need that extra help. All you should be able to do is go pray. And then we put limits on prayer. So what do? I pray to God for healing, but don't expect him to heal you, because it's not going to happen right now. You got to wait for providence to do it. Well, providence may be that counselor. But we forget that. We keep thinking it's all God, it's all God, it's all God.
We forget that God uses people to help heal. Yeah.
And so when it comes to the mental workings of our members, the psychological issues, we forget so many times that a professional can do amazing things. And if it weren't for Russell Crook, I'm going to tell you right now, I wouldn't be here before you, the woman I am. I started going to Russell, and the first few months, he kept telling me, Melinda, you're going to have to forgive. I'm like, I do not want to forgive these men. My dad's dead. He can't come back and ask me forgiveness. My ex-husband's still gone. He doesn't care. He's not paying me child support. He's not doing anything. Why should I forgive somebody who is so horrible? And Russell kept saying, Melinda, you're a control freak. Why are you letting these men control your life? Why are you letting people control your life? You should be letting God do the control. Just let it go. I'm like, I'm not letting it go. I'm not going to. I'm stubborn. Very stubborn. And I'd held on to that pain for so long. It's what I knew. I didn't know how not to be in pain.
The pain of your relationships was so familiar that you were afraid to let your pain go because you didn't know how to live healthy.
Right. I didn't know what was going to fill it. What's going to come in and fill that spot where that pain has been? Who's going to fill that spot where those men have been all my life?
The pain that came from those men, did it change how you viewed men in the church?
To a degree. However, I am so blessed that I had a grandfather who was a godly man, who loved the Lord, who loved his family, who loved his wife, who loved me. And so I had some good views. I had my uncle who was the same way. And so my dad was just one piece. And I am thankful that I was able to compartmentalize that and not hold that against all men. Now, overall,
because you had a good example of your grandfather. Your father did not taint, your ex-husband did not taint your view of men. Because I know I know there are some women of the church, they've had one or two bad experiences, maybe 3 or 4 really horrible experiences, and it's difficult. They don't believe that there is any godly men.
Yeah, and I've seen that, I've heard that, and And it's heartbreaking when you know that there are, and I'm like, but I've got Ray. Ray is godly. My grandfather was godly. There was this one man, and unfortunately, we hear all the bad stuff. Too many times we don't talk about the good stuff.
We don't talk about good news. We talk about bad news.
Yeah. And so that plays a part in it. And I've had friends in my life who weren't Christians that have been through the worst pain ever. And it's like there is one man that you can depend on, Christ. Christ can bring you to anything. He can, all you have to do is go to your knees one time and just let him. And let's go forward with that. But it's hard. And I think that's an issue for a lot of women. They see the masculinity of Christ and of God, and I've let men hurt me all my life. Why am I going to let another man hurt me? What happens if he lets me down?
Right.
And too many times we do that. We put God in a human place and not a godly place. And so that's, but I was surrounded by people who loved me, and I made it through. I was single for 8 years after my husband left me. I didn't date. I didn't want anything to do with dating. I didn't want a relationship. I wanted to fix me. I needed to fix my relationship with God. And that couldn't happen until I learned to forgive. And I tell the story, but like I said earlier, I didn't want to forgive. It was hard. And one night I went to bed and I was praying, God, just take this burden. I don't know what to do. What's going to happen when when this pain's gone? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? And I fell asleep crying. I woke up with my pillow soaked with tears and I was sobbing. But this time it wasn't tears of pain. It was tears of joy, of relief, because I woke up and that pain was gone. That weight was off of my shoulder. Yes, Gerald was still gone. Yes, my dad was dead and all those horrible things that happened. But that pain was gone. And I said, okay, I'm moving. And I kept moving forward, and it was another 4 or 5 years after that. I was at church at an event, and I told Deborah, she was an elder's wife, and we were talking, and I said, Deborah, I'm ready to move on. I'm ready for a relationship. But who's going to marry me? Who wants a woman who's raising a granddaughter? I'm already 42 years old. Who's even going to be interested? And she said, Melinda, I'm going to tell you, if you don't believe in prayer, you need to go have Miss Deborah pray for you. She said, we're going to pray, and we're going to pray right now. And she prayed that God, if it were His will for me to have a man in my life, to provide someone who was godly and who would love me and that baby. And because Abigail was only 2 at the time, not even 2. And I am not joking. 2 weeks later, I get a message on churchofchristSingles.com that says, hi. And I said, who are you? He's in Minnesota, just lost his wife. He's not interested in anybody else. I said, okay, he's safe. And he said, I'm passing through Fort Worth this week. Can I see you? And I said, well, I don't live in Fort Worth. I live in Cleburne. He said, that's where I'm going. It's where my dad lives. So we sat down and we started talking. And one of the things I noticed first about Ray was his love for the Lord. That man has a passion for God that just cannot be stopped. And everything he had to talk about revolved around his ministries, his love for people, his love for God. And I thought, okay. And of course, when I first met him, the poor guy is shaking half to death. He's scared to death of meeting somebody, and I'm scared to death. But I was on my lunch break from work, and my associates, I was a manager at Radio Shack, had told me, if you get in any trouble, text us the word pineapple, and we'll come save you. We'll lock the doors, and we'll come on down. Well, I never have texted the word pineapple yet. But I was just amazed that we knew so many of the same people, and it was all within the church. People that he knew that he had grown up with when he lived in Texas, that I had met as an adult. And yet he and I's paths had never crossed until that point. And we met the Saturday after Thanksgiving. We were married the 17th of February. And finding a man who loves the Lord, and girls, you need to listen to this and listen carefully. I'm not your mother. I'm not your grandmother. I'm not some lady in the church. I am a woman who has been there. I was married to a man who did not love God. And if he doesn't love God, he cannot love you. Not the way you deserve, not the way you need. You don't have to have a husband until you find the one that loves God. Be looking for that. You know, one of the reasons I'm telling my story is because there are so many who have gone through what I've gone through. Some that are going through it. Men, women. And the church doesn't talk about it. It's a dark subject. It's something that we keep hidden. But if we tell our story and we tell our healing, then we'll help the next generations to maybe prevent the problems. And if not, to at least know they have somewhere to go to talk to, somewhere that they can get relief and get healing. I am a member of the Church of Christ, and I have gone through pain. I've gone through abuse. I have suffered grief and loss of marriage, and I have, above all, experienced healing and grace. Fill them out. You'll know. You can watch them and listen to their conversations. Watch them with other people. Is their mind on things of the world, or is their mind on spiritual things? Is he going to help you to heaven, or is he going to hold you back? And don't think you can get him married and then get him baptized. That doesn't work. I tried it. It does not work. So with everything that I have, I beg you to listen to my words. Find the man that loves God, and he will love you. He will put you second over everything else. And you will never have to worry about whether or not he's going to hurt you, whether or not he's going to leave you, because if he doesn't leave God, he's with you.
I pray that you were blessed. I pray that you were encouraged. One of the things that we need to do in the body of Christ is we need to talk. We need to share our stories. There are too many Christians that are dying quietly, silently. They're dying in their homes. They're suffering with their children. They're medicating themselves, trying to feel better about what they're going through. And they need somebody to share their story with. They need somebody to talk to. And if that's you, don't feel like you're alone. If you're going through pain, if you're going through abuse, if you're going through suffering, maybe you're going through divorce, or maybe you're trying to raise your children all by yourself, don't you feel like you're alone. Don't feel like nobody understands. There's somebody that does. I pray that God sends someone into your life that'll be able to bless you and bless your journey. Be blessed.